of gold.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to the last episode of the season for NDNABA with Martin and Dan. I'm your host, Martin, and alongside of me is Dan. Boy, Dan, what an amazing journey it's been so far for
Oh
first
yeah,
season.
quite a season. Seriously, Martin. And really, I want to say before we get started, it's been a really great honor getting to know both you and all the guests we've had on the show. And just to give everybody a brief overview of our last episode, we featured Mandy Ralston of At Non-Binary Solutions, and we covered the latest information regarding the Judge Rotenberg Center and the ban on ESDs proposed by the FDA. Currently, we're still waiting for the final ruling. And we also discussed last time how there was some troubling legislation proposed regarding the LGBTQIA community that was casting sort of a shadow over Pride festivals. And so we did want to sort of follow up on some of those points if you guys want. But today, most of all, we definitely want to celebrate our neurodivergent analysts and neurodivergent communities all over. And we're so happy to have Dr. Shelby Dorsey and Brian Middleton with us today. Some of you guys know them. Aloha, you guys. Welcome to the show. And we have Bearded Behaviorist and SD Store subscriptions ourselves. But for those who don't know and aren't subscribed to your other accounts, you guys can definitely check them out there as well. We really wanted to touch briefly on WIBA this week. So Shelby, I saw that you were actually presenting, and I'm wondering if you can tell us about what we can look forward to the week of July 24th through the 26th this year.
Yes, so the Women in Behavior Analysis Conference is in Atlanta this year, but you can join either virtually or in person. And while I'm not presenting during the conference, I am hosting a workshop that's the day before the conference starts. And so my session is called Talk Nerdy to Me, Harnessing ChatGPT to Innovate How We Communicate. And it's about using ChatGPT and AI as assisted communication, as help professionally for both your day-to-day efforts as a behavior analyst, but also a possible tool for your clients and the people that you work with to help them communicate. And it's all about verbal behavior and high tech. And so it's going to be so fun. So if you're out there, please join the workshop. We'll have so much fun. And if not, I'll see you at the convention at least. Hopefully.
Oh, wow. That's so awesome. And thank you for correcting me that it's right before the convention.
Okay.
So is that on the 23rd, you said?
So I think the workshops are on the 24th and the conference is the 25th, 26th.
Oh, I see. So it actually will be that week on the 24th. And you guys can look out for Shelby there. And I love the sort of Weird Al nature of the title, Talk Nerdy to Me, but definitely we'll put the description and a little bit of a link to find out more below, as well as to the SD store. And Brian, how you doing as well? I wanted to find out what's been going on since last time you came on.
Quite a bit. Also, quick sidetrack. Shelby, did you know that there's a song called Talk Nerdy to Me?
I don't think I did.
It's a spoof off of Talk Dirty to Me.
Is it by Weird Al?
It's not by Weird Al. It's by somebody else. But the reason...
I need to look it up, and I'll run into it when the workshop starts. It'll be playing over the speakers, and I'll come through the middle like Oprah.
It's solid, and also I happen to know one of the people who was in the music video, so watch the music video.
Oh, that's
I'm
so
writing
cool.
it down right now.
Wow, that's so funny. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm definitely playing that as my intro music, Brian. You've just set up my whole intro. Thank you.
It's called it's by K-Face Rules.
Yep. But if you just search Talk Nerdy to Me, it's superb, and the music video is worth watching because it is a lot of Comic-Con cosplaying folks I think
That's
it was
so
actually
cool.
filmed at the Salt Lake Comic-Con back when it was called that, before Comic-Con sued them for calling it that. And they changed the name.
A
I
good
think
one.
it's like FanX or something now. But anyways, side note. But yeah, a lot's been going on. I'm now a clinical director at a center in Southern Utah. I'm really excited for this. We're working on building up. So this is the second center for the organization, Possibilities ABA. And I'm really excited to be a part of this organization because we are trying to demonstrate that the big box private equity, this is the way it's done. ABA does not have to be done. And it's working. So far, we're seeing quite a bit of success. I've even had a few of the newer staff comments like, wow, this is really well funded. And I'm like, yeah, because we actually allocate the money towards, supporting the kids and the people. Right.
Definitely.
So
Just like Mandy mentioned last week as well with her organization. I think she said she was able to have one and then make exit before COVID, and then she started non-binary solutions. And yeah, you guys can also look out for her noetic software. It's definitely coming out any day now. Just wanted to mention.
yeah.
And that's so great to hear, Brian, that you're still helping to promote our field from the inside. And I see you're also doing some really great work with a lovely bearded dragon. I wonder if you want to maybe tell us about that before we get into maybe the more serious news.
So one of the first things that was brought up was like, we want to make sure that kids have opportunities to be kids. And something that really matters for kids is interactions with animals. So from the very get-go, the operations team were all on board with making sure we had that sort of thing. We're coordinating with like service animal providers for creating visits for animals, and we're planning on having critter days and stuff. And then one of the BCBAs that was hired onto our team, she's actually the author of the Inappropriate Behavior blog. She has a bearded dragon, and she joked that it would be great to have a bearded dragon for me, so that way we could be doing Zoom calls, and she could have Barbara and I could have mine. And we talked about how lizards need to have old man names or old people names. And
I agree.
And so so
They
we
have
got
that dry skin, right?
well, yeah.
Exactly. They've got
Also disapproving glares.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I took it to the operations team and said, hey, would it be cool if we had a center mascot, a center pet? And the answer was not yes, it was hell yes. So enter Leroy Jenkins, the bearded dragon.
I knew it was after
Love
Leroy
the name.
And he does Leroy Jenkins it, by the way. He will happily run and jump and do stuff because he loves exploring. But
nice.
I will tell you right now, like the number of kids that we've had who are just like, can I hold Leroy? Can I hold Leroy? And like they're checking in with me and seeing if they can hold it. And like, and then of course the fun part about this fun little thing is that I've repeatedly been like, well, of course you can hold him. You don't have to ask permission. But they're still wanting to check. And I'm like, that's really cool. It's really great. One of the kids is like, can I help take care of him? And I'm like, uh-huh. And we've been doing task analysis and breaking it down and getting real world opportunities. We've been learning and exploring. Did you know that most lizards have something called a parietal eye?
Oh, is that kind of third eye that senses the?
It's the third eye on the back of their head that detects shadow and light, and in bearded dragons, ultraviolet light as well. And so teaching them about how when we go to pick Leroy up, we don't try grabbing him from behind. We move our hands slowly, and we're making sure that he can see our hands so that he's not stressed out. And it's just really great. And it just kind of goes to show, like, we can be behavior analytic without being
Absolutely.
Right.
And by the way, Brian, thank you for always being an example of how the whole is more the sum of its parts. And I see, you know, all your experience in, you know, when you're a special education teacher, for instance, and, you know, working with kids and, you know, finding that ability to treat everyone like people, and now coming in as a BCBA, using that experience all wrapped up into a, you know, naturalistic and inclusive package with Leroy, you know, for instance. And yeah, I really want to commend you for that. And shout out to all the analysts using the most artistry that they can to make, you know, the most fun services they can for their clients, all the RBTs doing that as well. You know, everybody, not just our neurodivergent consumers and employees in the field of ABA, but everybody doing that for the people they care about. Really pat yourself on the back. You know, those of you organizing these trips to see animals and to, you know, you get that motivation from students who really care about them as well. You know, give yourself another pat. Animals are great, and you know, all this stuff also supports the homes that they live in, right? When you go and support those organizations, so you know, it's a win-win, really. It's a win for the communities that you're bringing there, and it's a win for the animals. And yeah, with that, we definitely want to make sure our show is a win-win for everyone who is on the show, and so we really would love for you guys to check out the SD store and maybe support the Stop the Shock merchandise if you guys like to wear that stuff. I know I was seeing that myself. And Shelby, I'm wondering if you might want to tell us a little more about your shop, since we still haven't heard final ruling from the FDA yet.
Shelby, if you want, you can also mention that other thing related to your shop.
I was wondering, Brian, I was going to message you. I was getting on the internet right now to message you. So I have a spoiler at the end, but let me give you my whole spiel about the SD store. So first of all, it's funny that it's called the SD store because my name is Shelby Dorsey. But when I was engaged to my husband, I didn't want to change my last name. I was very settled on my name. I like my name, and I was not going to let the patriarchy change that. However, I was in ABA 101 at the time, and I was reading, and we were learning about the SD. And I was like, hold on. You're telling me that SD, and I love the way that it's written with an exponent, by the way. I just love that part of it. So I'm like, you're telling me like one of the most critical parts of ABA is SD, and my husband's last name is Dorsey. I text him in the class. I'm like, I've already bought the sdstore.com. I'm changing my name. And this was like, I don't know, 2015, 2000 something or early. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it. Then I've always wanted like a funny t-shirt shop. And you know, my life keeps progressing, and my dissertation ends up being perceptions and attitudes of ABA among secondary high school teachers. And, you know, spoiler alert, attitudes and perceptions aren't that great of behavior analysts and ABA. However, they are fans of the actual interventions. So we had interventions labeled, and then we had them labeled in ABA jargon, and they rated what they used in their classroom, but they were identical.
Love that.
And so we found out that they do like ABA. We just have a bad rap, and it's a reputation that we deserve. I mean, we just talked about Stop the Shock. This isn't something that was wrongfully given. So I just got to thinking, and I thought, you know, the SD signals reinforcement. And what if I started dressing really friendly when I go? Like, think Miss Frizzle. Got a Miss Frizzle vibe going on. So when I go into IEP meetings, when I'm going to meet parents and kids, how can I signal that when you come to me, you get reinforcement? Because that's the opposite of what everyone was thinking of me as I became a behavior analyst. And so it worked. I mean, quickly it worked. And so then I thought, well, what if I put on a t-shirt? I'm a t-shirts person. Like, I like t-shirts. That's what I wear every single day. It makes perfect sense. And what I found is that when you enter a space and you have something on your shirt that signals reinforcement, you become a reinforcer, and the interactions are completely different with kids, with parents, with principals, with other therapeutic providers. Yeah, it's just totally changes what they think about you. And I even had a friend text me and say, I bought a behavior analyst shirt, but I'm nervous to wear it. I'm like, why are you nervous? And she's like, people just talk so bad about us in schools and they don't know I'm a behavior analyst. And I'm like, no, wear it friendly. Think of Miss Frizzle. Like, you got this. Go in with a positive attitude. And she called me the next day and she's like, I'm going to wear my SD store shirt to every IEP meeting. She had compliments. People were asking her about it. And she had the one that also says, everyone needs positive reinforcement, and questions and teachers being like, we learned about that. I didn't know that was behavior analysis. And it ends up that after some conversation, people, especially naturalistic ABA, people use it. They like it. It's because it's nice. It's because it's fun. It's like the bearded dragon.
Absolutely.
And the best way that I knew how to do it was to put it on a t-shirt. And I do love fashion, and I do love color, and I like design, and I want to be creative. And I'm like, okay, these two things match. And so this was, as my career is progressing, I'm busy. I kind of cut it off during my dissertation. Then I use it as a way to distract myself, and finally launched the website. And it's more than a passion project. It's like the way that I feel like I can disseminate a science that changed my life, and changed how I was able to cope with the world when I wasn't coping very well. It's changed my children's life. I've watched hundreds of kids' lives be changed. I've heard first words, from a 5-year-old with a whole family in the room. It's just amazing. But it also, with great, what is the saying? I'm bad at these. Like, with great
power
something
great
becomes
responsibility, right?
With great power becomes great responsibility. Yes, that's the perfect saying to me for ABA, because it is so powerful. Then you start shocking people. Then you use punishment. Then you use tear gas. Then you use, because you do know how powerful it is. You start to use it in ways that are just absolutely horrendous. And so I feel like that part of my responsibility, I know all of this, I know how powerful it is, that I should be shouting about how we should be using it in this direction. And when it's used in the wrong direction, how harmful it is. And so that's kind of been behind the machines of like getting this thing off the ground. And so I love doing the fundraiser shirts, because I have hundreds, thousands of dollars in student debt. So while I want to give to every organization and pay for everybody's everything, I just can't do that. And I thought, okay, I can't do it, but maybe I can create artwork that can. And so I designed the shirt, and I wanted it to look like a stop sign. I wanted it to look like the sign when you go into an electric company and it's like, don't touch, we'll shock. And kind of have a visceral reaction when you see little kids' hands. So if you're listening to the podcast, go on the website and look at the design that I'm talking about. You'll notice it kind of looks like one of those like high voltage signs. And I wanted that to be on purpose, so it kind of pulls people in. And so
Definitely.
I probably took way too long on that intro, but
it's okay.
The exciting news is that Brian is going, or we are partnering, and we're going to have Bearded Behaviorist shirts at the SD store coming very, very soon.
That is so cool.
I know.
All right.
Not only that, I'm excited for this part as well, that it's not just going to be Bearded Behaviorist, it's also going to be punny shirts and fun stuff too.
Yeah.
Because But like what to what you were saying, Shelby, like with like that great power, great responsibility, that piece is so critical because like as behavior analysts, a lot of times we fall into mentalism. When we start engaging in justification of our services or supports. And I'm gonna say this, and there's gonna be some people who are pissed off at me for saying it. And sorry, not sorry. But unfortunately, Montrose Wolf kind of messed up a little bit when he published about social validity, because he titled it a subjective. He used the word subjective in talking about social validity, and it's not. Social validity is not subjective; it's contextual. There's a difference. It's a very small difference, but it's also a very huge difference. And a lot of times we see people who make the argument of, oh, well, social validity is subjective. It's not. It's contextual. And here's how we test it to see if it's contextual versus subjective. Let me ask you this question. This is a hard question to ask. I'm sorry if it's uncomfortable, but is chattel slavery socially valid?
Let's see. I would say no.
Okay. Was chattel slavery socially valid in 1777?
I'd say no, but maybe others would say yes.
I mean, so let me follow that up. Is indentured servitude socially valid?
For many, they still might say yes, but I would say no.
In 1777, was indentured servitude socially valid?
It's a tough question. I don't know if I can respond on that one, but
I had to Google validity definition. I'm going to be honest. I just Googled validity definition because I love word about, like, I'm reading it word by word, literally. And if it factually sound is one of the definitions for validity, then yes. But logical, or the quality of being logical, then no. So, but I do get what I'm with you, Brian, on contextual definitions and
I'm feeling
subjectivity.
It too. Right? So subjectivity doesn't quite help it stay operationally defined, does it?
So what I'm getting at here is that a lot of times when people say that something is socially accepted, they confuse that with socially valid. Because chattel slavery, the ability to own somebody else to the point that you can do with them what you will, that's what Black slavery in the United States was based off of, is the concept of chattel slavery. That is not socially valid. Same thing for indentured servitude. Now, if we did a comparison, which is more socially valid, chattel slavery or indentured servitude, you have the ability to work your way out of that slavery contract and be in a place where you are free. So if we were looking at it as a continuum, then indentured servitude is more socially valid than chattel slavery, but it's still not socially valid. Just because it's accepted, it does not mean it's socially valid. And here's the reason why. Because the number one mistake that Montrose Wolf made, and this is not to throw Montrose Wolf under the bus. This is to say we're a science that evolves and improves, and so let's evolve and improve. Okay. So the mistake he made was he said it was subjective, and he forgot to center the rights of the individual. Because social validity starts with the individual who's receiving the services and then moves outward from there. Now, does that mean that the person can do anything and everything they want no matter what? Of course not. Yet that's also the argument that those people who seek to try to morally disengage and justify their behavior try to do. Like one of my favorites is when a presenter at CalABA 2023 joked about, we're not just going to let them run into the street. Like that's something that we're encouraging people to do. But that's a logical fallacy. It's something called a straw man, where it's representing something in extreme to try to justify your behavior. Yet when it comes to social validity, the question of whether or not a person has the right to do whatever they want, obviously the answer is no. There's obviously a reason why behavior analytics services and other services and supports are needed, because we operate together. We're social creatures.
Absolutely. There are certain laws that are limiting, such as you're not allowed to do behaviors that result in another person's death, for instance, right? And we as behavior analysts, we're not allowed to do harm. Is another important principle and ethical law that we all sort of swear to, as well as an oath that we take as clinicians. Any clinician is sworn to do no harm, not just a medical doctor. Martin, I know we got a little carried away, but
no
I
worries.
you also had some awesome questions for these guys, so I really want you to go ahead, fire away, and don't hold back. This is the finale, and I'm ready to see some fireworks here, to be honest. I've been waiting to introduce
Me too.
All right. No worries. So I'm looking through the questions right now. There was one that just looked into my head, Shelby, because I know you are a BCBA, which is awesome. I'm a behavior specialist. So my question is, for behavior specialists to have a tough session, like the clients are throwing tantrums and they don't really want to deal with session, what are some tips for specialists to like help them say, like everything is okay, everybody a bad day, and just to keep on trying their best and not give up mentally or something like that? Because I had a client that had that wanted nothing to do with a session, and my clinical lead wanted me to wait for like 45-50 minutes into session to restart or at least try. And I was like, what's the whole point, because this kid's having a bad day. I don't want to run goals while he's having this temper tantrum, because I don't want to get in harm's way, And it's like, it makes me think, why am I a behavior specialist? So if there's any pointers you could give either a new specialist or a veteran specialist who deals with stuff like this.
This is the perfect question to start on, because I'm coming from two directions. So one is just my advice to you, and then my other is more from a clinical viewpoint, that I would say this is a conversation you should have with your BCBA. You should take my advice and talk to your BCBA. So with my teams, what we do is we do a 3-level program: 0, 1, 2, happy, relaxed, engaged, agitated, irritated, hyperactive. 3 is crisis, which is actually 2, because number 1 is 0. Happy, relaxed, engaged is 0. And so one thing, when you're reading about happy, relaxed, engaged, we think about the client a lot. But what we talk about where I work and with my techs is the tech also has to be in happy, relaxed, engaged to really get the session going and flowing, where you are learning and teaching and modeling and working through things. And when we can not always, have sessions where our learners are in HRE, and we can't always be in HRE, which happy, relaxed, engaged, for anybody listening that is hard with acronyms. So what I recommend is, when you're not at work, think about the things that you can do for yourself to soothe yourself and to get yourself into that HRE, happy, relaxed, engaged. And sometimes I even talk with people and say, like, okay, maybe you're not happy, because some people are never happy if they're at work. Happiness belongs in another category, but you do need to be relaxed and engaged, especially when you're working with a client. So what does that look like for you? Then once you know what it looks like on the outside, then start bringing it into work. So if you're having that client and your supervisor says, we need to wait this out 40 minutes, 50 minutes, maybe that's part of the program. Think about, at that time, are you yourself in HRE? If you are, then maybe there's some way that you can be the SD, little plug, to signal to your learner that you can they can contact reinforcement through you. It may not be the programs, but if you're not relaxed and engaged, then there's zero chance that the learner is going to be able to get that from you. So that's my recommendation for you, is that that's what you can control. That's what you can think of. And instead of leaving a session, you kind of come into that. And then the second part is chat with your BCBA about if that's something that you can talk about, whether the learner's in really a state to learn. And if not, if there's some break you can take. You know, we all need a break sometimes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And I do want to just highlight really quick that, just so everyone knows, the research does suggest that rewarding an individual by giving them their autonomy back on the precursor phase of a behavior prevents it from becoming severe. And that reinforcement is not sufficient to maintain the severe behavior. So therefore, by maintaining a harmless precursor, you are most certainly doing a perfectly harmless thing. You're doing no harm, your duty as a clinician, and you're doing a great job by promoting that environment of HRE. You know, a funny example for people, I was thinking, you know, if they really don't think about HRE, they don't think it applies, then ask them, okay, well, then tell me, have you ever done a Zoom in your pajamas and not told everyone about it? And if they stop and they're like, oh, then you got them. They most certainly value HRE, and that's where the pajamas came in, I'm sure. And not that I'm in pajamas right now, actually. I am wearing shorts, and I just didn't want to show you guys. But in Hawaii, we wear shorts every day, so that's kind of regular for us. But yeah, thank you so much for touching on HRE quickly, Shelby.
Thank you.
And, Martin, did you have any more questions? I know we really wanted to find out, you know, if I might ask one quickly, you know, and Martin, if you want to add, what are the nuances as an autistic clinician in this field that both affect caseloads that you work on and the work environment that you work within?
So research supports this, and I have found it to be true as well, is that when employees self-disclose to a company, there are more positive interactions with management, with staff. And I was a little worried about, I mean, I read the research before I told anybody I had autism, because I was like, I want to do what's most beneficial for myself. And so one part of that is by just telling people, I can even describe what my behaviors may look like before, so that when they happen, they're not so surprised. So pre-autism diagnosis and disclosure, I was oftentimes labeled as too direct, taskmaster, aggressive. And I don't think that anybody in my personal life would call me those things, maybe direct, but it's really more of my desire to be clear, my desire to be straightforward and efficient. And so one way in the field that it's really helped me is because we are technological here in ABA, my language doesn't come across as hard as, say, when I was a teacher. So I'm being clear, concise, systematic, technological, all of these things as a behavior analyst. Whereas when I was in a different job, my conciseness, my directness, my choice of word was looked at as off-putting. So like that's one major thing about being autistic and in this field. If you have those kinds of comments about your speech, then it really lends itself. However, on the other side, I am a behavior analyst that works in the autism industry. And so there's big differences to me for people who are going to be behavior analysts if you're working in the autism industry and if you're not. And if you are working in the autism industry, you need to know about autism. And I don't know about Brian, but in my ABA coursework, zero autism talk. Zero. Thankfully, I was also getting a special education PhD and I have a counseling degree. And so I was in it, but in my ABA coursework, none. And so that shapes my, like being an autistic BCBA shapes it there, because I have a lived experience understanding and a education about it. And so I kind of fly my autism flag when people start to get it wrong. And before I was diagnosed and before I was disclosed, I couldn't do that. It was just, so what's your opinion on autism versus my opinion on autism? We're just two neurotypical people having this conversation. Once I was able to say, like, I have an official diagnosis, this is here, I noticed that I was respected in my conversation about autism a lot more, and was able to enter conversations about behaviors, autistic culture. Social validity is a great one. Sometimes I would enter and the goals are not socially valid to me. Tying shoes, only if you want to tie shoes. I will tell parents, I only program to tie shoes if the client wants to learn how to tie their shoes. 90% of the kids in my child's classroom today were wearing Crocs. So do we need to know that, if those kind of
Oh
skills?
yeah, and those archaic idioms, right? Like in the same boat. And by the way, everyone, in the same boat is now Gone with the Wind. And if you haven't seen Gone with the Wind, then you can't use in the same boat anymore. So we'll put it that way. Martin, do you also do you kind of resonate with that as well? Is there a little bit of strength in having a diagnosis and knowing a thing or two about perspective taking in this field coming in as a
yes
clinician?
and no. Yes, because it's like, as I started working with these kids, it's easier for me to connect with them. And what I've actually done in the past is I've used ventriloquism. I'm actually a ventriloquist as well. And so I use the ventriloquist dolls because studies showed that younger kids focus more when there's like one of those Sesame Street style kind of. So I've been incorporating my ventriloquist doll into sessions and group sessions, and so.
Oh, that's is that why I'm such a good co-host, huh? Are you getting me?
It's
maybe yeah.
Martin, it's interesting you should mention that, because I actually have another autistic friend who does the same thing, and she was sharing on an ABA group, and this was years ago, and a doctor of behavior analysis threatened to blackball her for being mentalistic. Because that was not evidence-based, and how dare you use that, like,
right.
And that's kind of that kind of goes to the heart of like the problems that we're facing, is that like we're experiencing this rigidity within our field because we're not truly educated. Like, the programs are teaching, oh, this is what ABA looks like, and it's like there's no flexibility. To the point that you were talking about, Shelby, with like the education program that we've gone through, not only are we not taught about autistics and autistic experience if we're working in the autism industry, but we're not taught about autistics and the autistic experience from the autistic perspective. Because if you, and this is so critical, if you look at the way that we're taught, it's all within the pathology paradigm. It's all framed from the perspective of person with autism, diagnosed with autism. I am a person who has autism, right? All those different things. And yet we're beginning to understand that just like being queer, just like being BIPOC, just like being any other part of humanity, like this is just a part of what's being human. And interestingly, in the 1970s, when it comes to queer services and queer treatments, it was a bunch of academics and professionals who said, we reject all of the research that pathologizes homosexuality, queerness of any type. We reject it. We're not accepting it. And now today, if somebody who has that pathology approach towards somebody who's queer tries to submit an article, they'll be laughed away from it. Mm-hmm. They'll be mocked, and at worst mocked, and at most they'll get a polite rejection letter. And yet right now, in almost every single university, research that's been conducted by people who pathologize autistics is accepted. Behaviors by people who are still actively teaching, where they're publishing research that's pathologizing autistics, is accepted. Judge Rotenberg Center, Lovaas Institute, ABAI, did I mention CASP? Yeah, all of these organizations are still pushing this narrative that autism is a disorder that needs to be fixed. Maybe they're not actually saying it exactly like that, but some of them are.
Right.
Some of them are. In fact, that person that I mentioned at CalABA 2023 got a standing ovation with his conclusion of his talk being indistinguishable as a socially valid. That same person is the person who threatened my friend with blackballing for using puppets towards helping increase stimulus salience. I can use the behavior analytic term to explain what's happening, is the increasing stimulus salience to change and make it so that the individual is engaged. Guess what? Since then, there's research that demonstrates that using puppets and cartoons and those sorts of things increases engagement, and it increases the probability of the individual learning the appropriate skill that's being taught. So like it goes back to like the shift is multifaceted. There's multiple ways of making the shift. There's more than one way to start it. So I don't say there's only one way of doing it. I know there's some people who say, oh, you have to do it this way. And my response is, bullshit. Sorry, not playing. Like, I think it's a yes and situation of yes, we show people how to do it. And we also challenge the negatives. We challenge the harmful things. Yeah. Just like what happened with the way that academia was treating folks who are queer, and just like we should be doing and continuing to do to challenge any sort of racism.
Definitely. Yes, and it's contextual, right? And, by the way, I really love that newsletter, The Functional Contextualist, I often see on your page, and checking the link below, we'll definitely be putting functional contextualists in there for anyone who wants to get some context from which to then maybe help evaluate social validity case by case, right? So yes, there's a subjective element, and it's contextual, is what I mean by that in improv language for everybody who loves improv. Yeah, Martin, I know we're getting carried away, but I wanted you to finish what you're saying. Maybe you said yes, it helped, but also no, right? And I think Brian.
No, you're good.
Right. Yes, of course, I can totally see how being a ventriloquist is definitely going to come in handy in sessions. Just like Brian just said, the puppets and the cartoons are actually scientifically proven to be beneficial. But I know you mentioned no, and I wonder what's your personal experience on that?
Yeah. Well, most of the time, with some people that I've talked to, they would rather not hear an autistic's perspective inside because they think we're just trying to shut ABA down. And so I've had most of the time I keep quiet that I'm autistic to coworkers because I don't want to get like that negative reaction, but that's pretty much it. I mean, it's really hard to explain, but
Monk said it really well. It's a blessing and a curse. Of course, that was in reference to OCD. If you guys are Monkophiles and you like reading Monk as much as me, by the way, check out what was it, Monk's last investigation, or the movie that came out recently. I love that one. It was a great comeback. But yeah, blessing and a curse, right, Martin? Does that kind of resonate with you?
Yeah.
I really identify with that, Martin, too, and mine's from a bit of a different perspective. But in the capacities that I work, or where I work and who I work around with, we're all treating the ABA as very seriously. We're treating as kind of a weird word, but we are all in it to make progress, to make gains, to make goals. We love it. We're XYZ. and we are serving children that have an autistic diagnosis. So there we go. We're all there.
Yeah.
And people love to say that they work with, have hired, or that I'm autistic. It's like the token. But then in that same breath, they love to say they work with autistic people. So I guess it's exactly opposite of you, but then it comes to the same pain point of you don't like working with me because you treat me like I don't understand what you're saying. You think that I'm irresponsible, or that I'm that I got a PhD from help, that I had some sort of, it's like, what? And I posted about it on Instagram, and I had several people message me that have said, like, if you were diagnosed as a child, I was diagnosed as an adult, but everybody wants you to be their token autistic. But then when you act autistic, they just refuse to understand you. They want to misunderstand you. It needs to be a, like, I don't want to hear from you, or don't say that, or I don't want this. And it's not really as welcome as they seemed that it was. And as a person who takes things literally and doesn't have a lot of subcontext, that is really painful to sign up to be someone's token autistic. And then when I start doing something that's autistic, it's like, stop. And that is something that I hear a lot from the community, is the ABA community wants us to be the friendly to ABA, critical but friendly, but then also when we are autistic, they want to fix us, and these aren't things to be fixed. And so I really resonate with you there.
It definitely speaks to me, because it touches on kind of the double empathy problem, as well as the research suggesting, that autistic people are more likely to speak up in the workplace to things that are wrong. And then that makes often pressures come in, and labels such as problematic employees, being thrown around to some people who were doing essentially what their training offered, them the resources to do.
Daniel, I've been fired from a job from that. I mean, I was literally fired because I spoke up about that. Well, it was actually the best thing that ever happened to me. Hindsight, I always think if you're fired from someplace, you probably weren't meant to be there, but that's what happened. I stood up and I spoke out, and I really thought that I was very young. I thought I was going to get like a gold medal of honor. I felt so honorable and proud. And they escorted me to my car with my things in a box, and said I would have like they like read you this thing that's like, if you ever set foot on the property again, you'll be violating da da da. I'm like, what? All I did was tell the truth. I have proof. Like, this is what I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't know I was autistic at the time. Which not that it would have mattered, but to your point exactly. We're often the whistleblowers, but we are also punished. For those types of things.
So it gets tough. So, it gets tough working in ABA.
Definitely.
It does.
So I've got 4 more questions for you guys. I found these last 4 are perfect. I mean, we might go a little over time, which is totally fine. This is our last episode of the season. So these questions are for both. Yeah, these questions are for both you and Brian. So the first one for the both of you is, what is your philosophy regarding the use of reinforcement and consequences in behavior therapy?
You want me to tackle that one?
Yeah, start first. Let me ponder.
Reinforcement is, consequences are, right? They exist, they happen. It's something that a lot of times people think positive reinforcement means it's good. That's incorrect.
Just means it increases.
That's it. That's all it is it's a description of something that happens. Just like consequence, people think consequence equals bad. But the consequence of me saving my money is I was able to afford to get the thing that I like. So my philosophy is, when I'm doing the work that I'm doing, is that I do not presume that just because something is reinforcing, it is beneficial for the person. Just like I do not presume that just because there is a consequence or a punisher does not mean that that is harmful to the person. Because ultimately it has to do with context, and a critical aspect of context, especially when we're talking about the 70+% of behavior analysts who work with autistics, is that we need to take into account not only the ontogeny or learning history of the individual, but we need to also incorporate and understand the phylogeny of the individual as well as their culture.
Definitely.
Because all three control behavior within an environment. So to presume that just because something is reinforcing, it means that it's good is a false presumption, and in and of itself is potentially, putatively, if you will, harmful.
Definitely. There are dynamics that determine whether that reinforcement is allocated in a good way or a bad way. And, just like ABA itself, as you're saying before, Shelby, with great power comes great responsibility. I like to maybe quote the latest Star Trek episode. If anyone saw the recent Discovery finale, ABA is like, this is like science is like a brick, right? And a brick can be used to build something or destroy a body or a window or something like that, And we want to use it to build things. Martin and I like to say we want to use the light side of the force, and we are straying away from the dark side of the force, largely in favor of using the light side, as I mentioned. I say that as my poor grandfather keeps on giving me a call, and I definitely am going to call him back once we wrap up here. But Martin, I know you had a few more questions, so why don't you go ahead?
I just have a couple more. These are, I mean, hopefully these are good. I feel like that was a tough question to ask. So I'll just get down to the last two. For the both of you, what advice would you give parents or caregivers who are new to behavior analysis?
Center your child's rights. Sorry.
That's a good one.
Okay.
Center your child's rights. I take like a more global approach, and when I speak with parents, I talk to them about behavior analysis, and this kind of fits in with your last question. I talk about like operant conditioning and reinforcement and punishment in ways, and I equate it to gravity. It is, whether you believe in gravity or not does not make it go away. So I draw the little square and I say, positive is adding, and so we do this. And then once they get that basic, that basic understanding, then I move into, and now I want to use this kind of the scientific product that I've just brought you. I want to use this to give your child the best version of their lives, how they can access the things that they want and need. So that brings into context their culture, their religion, possibly where they live, what's important to the family. I'm very values based. So when I meet a family, I like for them to tell me about their values. And then I always try to bring it back. It's like, remember that little box of science that I told you about? Well, when you do X, you are increasing the behavior that is actually harmful to your child. So instead, let's do this. And I kind of bring it back, like it kind of sounds like an equation when we're just here talking about it. But when we center on that science and I can bring them back to it, I've been able to take a little bit of the bias out. And also I try to coach them on, and if you go to another provider, do not forget that they are using this science to increase or decrease behavior. At the end of the day, we're increasing or decreasing. And so you are deciding what we increase and decrease, especially because I work with children, and center on that. So I think that plays into what Brian said as well, but that's my like longer version philosophy of getting into ABA.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
And I might want to add real quick that ABA can also be used very well in the same scientific capacity to identify what's reinforcement and what is punishment and remove unnecessary punishing variables. Sometimes there are
Absolutely.
natural things, right? What's a natural punishing variable? Gas. I'm getting some gas right now, and that causes me to stretch once in a while so that it doesn't build up, right? Natural punishing variable right there, right? Ouch.
Yep.
It's immediately after I'm drinking my Vietnamese coffee, which you guys may notice I already drank it this morning. So the timeline checks out, in case you're wondering. But Martin, before we do run out of time on our season's timeline here, which, oh God, it's been such a road. I wonder, what things you might have observed lately, particularly in the ADHD community, as well as about ADHD, which we don't talk about a lot on this show, but it's definitely something that we should, because we want to support all neurodivergent identities on NDNABA.
I actually have one final question for Shelby. I think this kind of ties in with the whole autism and ADHD. Awesome. What resources do you recommend for families navigating autism and ADHD?
That's a tough one, because there's not a, to my knowledge, there's not a large pool of family-friendly resources. But one thing that I would say is that you're going to have to do a little blending and some individualization. So there's a magazine and a website that I subscribe to. It's ADD magazine, and they have lots of great resources for family and parents. And every once in a while, they'll do like a ADHD and autism. If you have both comorbidity, then they'll give you information. But it's a really rich resource of all different types. And so I often tell people to go there and then integrate that with your autism resources, and then look at your child, and maybe it's your clinical psychologist or your behavior analyst that's helping you learn the patterns of behavior that are frustrating your child, the patterns of behavior that they seem like are so I have this thing, and this is part of my autism, this like slow speech thing. And so when I'm get excited about a question, it's like going on in my head so quickly, I can't get it out of my mouth. And this feels like the perfect podcast to say that, because I'm always so envious of Brian, because he can just pull like the names of articles out of his head, and like the name is like sitting right behind my forehead, but the connection to go out of my mouth like shuts down. So bear with me while I scramble my words. But anyways, you look at the observable behaviors. If your child is able to communicate vocally, then ask them. If not, observe, write down, take notes, and see what, like, I know we just talked about pathology, but the symptomology, especially if you're dealing with a little that's having behaviors that are hurtful, harmful, your family's in distress, and then go through and look at those ADHD, the list as well, and figure out what's prevalent to your child and go off of those. As a behavior analyst, I always like to say, let's do the behavior stuff first, because we can see it, we can observe it. And then if we need to get into medicine, if we need to go see another provider, then do that. But if you're a parent out there and you're just overwhelmed because your child has both diagnoses now, learn about your child. And then once you are informed about them, that will really be the best guide to navigate any of the resources that are, available online.
Perfect.
Brian, anything to add to that subjectivity and context that Shelby just brought to us, and as well as individualized care? So
first off, Shelby, I do that same thing that you were talking about, and so I get I can't remember a particular name or that sort of thing. It's mostly a lot of recitation and rumination that leads to me remembering that stuff.
Brain farts are just gas of a different area. I hope that's not the title of the
Except for
episode.
I can like see, I can like hear it in my brain. So it's like it's there. It's not even missing. It's there. It just can't get through. There's just a block of communication. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, and I know exactly what you're talking about, because I'm having that exact same thing happening right now for a resource that I want to recommend. I can't remember. I can't recall the name of the exact resource, but I know that the speech guy does a lot of work with her on it. But a lot of times when you have a co-occurrence of autism and ADHD, it also increases the probability of having what's called a PDA profile. PDA is referred to as...
have that.
Yeah, same. So a PDA profile, the pathology framework of it is pathological demand avoidance. The non-pathological, more functional contextual framework is persistent drive for autonomy. And so that persistent drive for autonomy and looking for ways to be able to problem solve and address, because like, yes, symptomology is the term that's used by the pathology paradigm, and it's the term that's used by society now. But you can also look at it as, what are the indicators? What are the things that are happening in the environment? What are the variables? There's so many different ways, and it's like the critical thing is not getting hung up on like too hung up on the language. Yes, we want to shift our language, but we're going to slip, right? We're going to make mistakes because this is the environment that we're in. So can I have a little kindness and grace for myself, even as I'm learning to improve? And when it comes to ADHD, a lot of it is being nonlinear in our contingency analysis. It's looking at how the things interact and play off of each other, and realizing that one of the factors that is going to play in is the dopamine aspect, which that is critical to understanding ADHD, which, like, there's a non-pathologizing term that has been going around the ADHD community of, like, Dave, I think it is, dopamine something. Variation. But like, the entire idea of it is understanding that the individual who is an extreme multitasker, if you will, instead of using ADHD, like extreme multitasker, it's that their brain produces less compared to the neurotypical, and that's not a bug, that's a feature. Because evolutionarily speaking, if your brain produces a little bit less dopamine, then you're a little bit more active. Therefore, you're doing a little bit more exploring. You're a little bit more awake at night. So that way you're a little bit more likely to be able to spot the enemy at the gate, or the predator, right? You're a little bit more effective at spotting those things in natures when you're hunting and gathering, or when you're out exploring and looking for resources. It's not a bug, it's a feature. And the disability arises from the interaction between the individual and the environment. So to expect an ADHD kid to sit at a table and do the same thing over and over and over again, instead of creating an environment where they can thrive, is to create disability. Because disability is not something, it's not a homunculi that resides inside the person. Disability is an interaction. It's something that happens between the individual's characteristics and the environment. Now, does that mean that, oh, okay, we have the solution, we're done? No, obviously not. Because very clearly we have struggle points, and we're always going to have struggle points. The concept of rats, blanking, perfect example of me blanking.
There's a good word for it.
The blanking, yeah.
Blanking, yeah. Blankety blank blank blank. The literal translation of the word is nowhere. Utopia. There we go. Utopia is literally nowhere. It's never going to happen. We're always going to have conflict. If you want peace on Earth, wait until the Earth gets consumed by the sun as it turns into when it explodes, because that's when we'll have true peace, right? But understanding that, like, oh, hey, we're dealing with conflict, and the conflict is not a problem. The problem is that we're not finding solutions and resolution to the conflict. We're creating systems where we're coercing and controlling and repressing and harming each other. Now, does that mean that we're always going to have magical unicorn poops and rainbows everywhere? No. But it does mean that we need to be collaborative in our environments. Like, if you're a parent who has an autistic child, an ADHD child, a child who has high support needs, profound autism, if you want to use that, but if you're a parent whose every day is this, is that, and it looks like that's always going to be the case, guess what? I'm speaking specifically to you, and I'm also speaking to the parent who has the kid who goes to school and does really great at school and then comes home and the kid blows up. I'm speaking to everyone here. The challenges we face are real. I see you. I want you to be heard. I want us to figure out solutions to these problems. And the solutions do not start with dehumanizing your kid. The solutions do not start by disrespecting their rights or saying that, well, I'm the adult, so I know better, and therefore, and steamrolling over them. They don't start there. They start with, I see you. I hear you. I get that you're struggling. I get that we are struggling. We're in this together. As Brene Brown would say, we're in the messy middle. Right? Can we be in the messy middle? Can we be okay with being in the messy middle, or do we have to try to coerce and control? And I would argue that the reason why ABA has a bad rap is because we went that route of having to coerce and control. And I want our field to be better. And not only do I want our field to be better, I want our world to be better. No, ABA will not save the world. ABA will be part of the problem solving that we need to have.
It can be. It can be.
Can
if
be.
we
There
use it.
It can be used to
if we
be a
disseminate
brick,
it,
right?
and we
Be a brick and build something, I should say, right?
This
right,
is I have a micro point, just a tiny little point that I wanted to say in the middle of Brian, but I didn't want to interrupt him, is that one of the things about ADHD that I think is really important for parents that are in ABA is that sometimes the motivation needs to come before the motivation then creates behavior momentum to get the job done, to get whatever needs to be done. And in like traditional ABA and the ABA that we see in the research, specifically with autistic only or true autistic, I can't remember how the language of it, but is that oftentimes we get the first then. Well, but with ADHD, especially as Brian was talking about the dopamine, first then is not always effective, and sometimes it'll take years and years of ABA therapy trying to do first then procedures.
And
when
profiles, I might add.
It doesn't always work that way. So if you have a PDA profile, if you have ADHD, then you may need to reconsider how the contingencies are laid out in your programming and in your parenting, because it's a different brain wiring. We have to individualize. So there's my little tidbit about that. And maybe some practitioners can take from that.
Are you saying that we're actually 4-term contingencies, not 3-term contingencies, and motivating operations matter? What?
Yeah, MOs matter.
Crazy. We need to make a t-shirt. MOs matter. That's a t-shirt.
MOs matter too. And you know what? I know you run the SD store, but MOs matter too, Shelby. Jeez.
I know.
Just joking.
That's perfect.
Well, with the SD store, bringing up the SD store is perfect, because like when we talk about SD, discriminative stimulus, why S? Because stimulus matters. It is mathematical, right? Was SD, SR plus, SR minus, right? So like discriminative stimulus is not that reinforcement is available, it's to signal that reinforcement may be available. And literally what our job as behavior analysts is to help our learners, regardless of who they are, to identify when reinforcement may be available, and also discriminate when there's S delta, when there's a possibility that reinforcement is not available, so that they can make the decisions of what matters to them.
Definitely.
Right.
I'm really glad that you brought that up and clarified it for everybody, you guys. And before we go, we want to make sure that we know what to look forward to. So is there anything else you guys would like to shout out before I hand off to Martin?
Well, first of all, look for our collaboration at the SD store. We're working on it, so stay tuned. I want to recount that I'll be at WIBA in July, and there's going to be a link that you can register with my code. And the code is really important because I don't do research, so I have to show conferences that I'm like worth bringing out. So if you sign up under my code, you're showing that you've heard me, and that's really valuable to me. And then my Instagram, which is my main voice, that's like where I put everything out because I can't keep up with multiple social medias, is at DrShelbyDorsey. So Dr. Shelby Dorsey. So I want to like plug myself there.
Yeah, definitely.
Brian, what do you have us looking forward to?
So stay tuned to the Functional Contextualist for some more posts, and also I'm hoping to get some guest posts on as well, because the Functional Contextualist isn't my thing, it's an our thing. And I'm actually collaborating with a few peers on a couple articles that hopefully should be published within the next year. And I'm also working on an article independently that's going to be a rebuttal to some concerning behaviors I'm seeing come out of our community. So
I can't wait for that.
Fingers crossed on that. I'm also working on multiple books that are getting closer and closer to completion. My most excited one I'm excited for is called Behavior Brain. And it's a children's book that's written for kids to teach them how to practice and utilize ACT.
I love that.
That also teaches adults how to practice and utilize ACT in a very behavior analytic way. Because one of the number one mistakes that we make in behavior analysis is we presume that the way that ACT is applied towards adults should be the way it's applied towards kids. And we need to flip it around. We need to teach how to apply ACT from a body up level, not from a head down level.
Definitely. And if you guys
I love that, Brian.
Oh yeah, ACT ACT. You can definitely find out more on Brian's page. Check the link below for Bearded Behaviorist, and you can also follow him on LinkedIn as well, his Instagram, and on all your favorite platforms, as well as he's always doing a good podcast episode. That's why we love to have Brian here. And thank you so much again, Brian, for coming back. By the way, we really couldn't be happier with the turnout of this episode, and thank you to Shelby. You guys have been really awesome guests, and we really admire the work you're doing in the community for behavior analysts, for neurodivergent behavior analysts, and just for communities. As we said in the last episode, I think you guys are doing really good just services, community services in that matter, and helping communities have extra strength that they need in a tough time. And that definitely has value. I'd love you guys to be seen on the show. Martin, you too, you've been really helping the community out there.
Thank you.
It's been a great year for you, and congrats again on your gold medal in the long jump in Special Olympics.
I appreciate it.
Congrats on your declaration, Autism Acceptance Inclusion Months. Congratulations on your book. Congratulations on your business. Congratulations on your single that we use as our theme song. Shout out to Danny.
Hey, Martin, is it true that you're a DJ?
Yeah, that's true.
DJ.
My husband is a DJ, and I learned right before this. I got on your Instagram and saw that you were a DJ, and I was like, what? So that's for another day, but we should really talk about the DJ world and behavior analysis, because there's
Yeah,
a lot
definitely.
of cool things.
There's an EO for
Definitely.
everybody.
Yeah.
Establishing up. But yeah, Martin the Wolf, check him out on Spotify.
Okay.
Mr. Martin the Wolf, did you have anything to close us out on?
Thank you all for everyone tuning in to this season. I'm very excited to see who to bring on for a future episode as we take this break. I'm getting ready for the California National Games and also preparing for 3 conferences. So stay tuned for more info on that.
Definitely. We'll be updating you guys as Martin goes and gets ready for those 3 conferences this year. I'm also looking forward and hoping to be at WIBA. I'm having a paper presented at PRABA, Puerto Rico ABA this year with my colleague at ABA Con Isabel. Shout out to her. And shout out to all our friends who have been on the show. Let's go ahead and give a little quick rundown. Why don't we? At Behavior John, at Jared Van Education, you, Brian, at Bearded Behaviorist, at Everyday Behaviorist, Jennifer Haddock, at the Dubai Autism Doctor, our friend Dr. Nassim, at Dr. Shane T. Spiker, who was on when Dr. Nassim was sick and he couldn't be here. So thanks to him as well.
Shane Spiker gives the best hugs.
Oh, yeah, he's really good. Check out Paperback Behavior if you guys want to see more of him and hear about his ABS labs he talked about on the show. We also had the Psychobabble BCBAs at the Psychobabble BCBAs. What are their names? Lauren and Erica. And totally going to cut that part out where I forgot their names for a second. Then we had last time at Non-Binary Solutions, Mandy Ralston on the show. Thank you so much, Mandy, for coming on. That was a really awesome episode. Yeah, thanks everyone for supporting us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for, hearing this long list of names at the end of the finale. But we will put all the links in the description below, so check out for more. Keep your eye on the FDA press releases. Look out for the final ruling. Make sure you guys attend LGBTQIA Pride this year and support the community and all communities in an inclusive manner with everything you do. Let's raise a world that we can be proud of in both spheres of neurodiversity and in the realm of ABA.
Don't forget
Martin,
Eileen Lamb.
Yes, we wanted to share happy news to close us out on. Martin, did you want to go ahead and share actually?
No, I just wanted to thank Eileen Lamb for joining us this year as well. That was honestly one of my favorite episodes, being able to interview her.
Yes, and congratulations, Eileen. We're so happy that it all worked out with your son and everything that you were advocating for got pushed through for his needs. And, we're really happy to hear that kind of progress in our field, that the advocacy works, right? And if you guys are out there, you're raising awareness, you're doing your part, you're taking an hour outside of work, go ahead, pat yourself on the back, all right? You did it. You helped create that field of dreams. We're doing our best this year, and we'll continue all summer long, and we'll be back before you know it. All righty. Thank you guys for being on the show.
See ya.
Oh!
See ya.
Special guest for the finale.
Oh my gosh, Brian, we forgot our last guest.
Yeah, that was awesome. I just wanted to throw that in there. All right, everyone. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we will catch you on the flip side. Bye.
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 Bye, guys.
Cover me with your light, take me home. Forever give shining